prospective executive officer of the cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., and it is my privilege to be your master of ceremonies this morning. On behalf of the Coast Guard's Commander of Atlantic Area, welcome to the commissioning of the cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. Distinguished guests, at this time, I ask that you please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the ceremony. If you need medical assistance during the ceremony, medical personnel are standing by. Military members, please remain covered and follow my lead for rendering honors throughout the ceremony. When the national anthem is played, all guests not in uniform, please stand facing the flag with your right hand over your heart. Veterans are invited to follow my lead in rendering honors. The commissioning ceremony is one of the most important traditional milestones in the life of a cutter, as it represents the readiness of the cutter to conduct Coast Guard operations and marks her entry into active service. This time-honored tradition dates back to the commissioning of our first revenue cutter, the Massachusetts, launched in 1791. Since that date, hundreds of Coast Guard cutters have undergone this transition from a silent hull to a living cutter of the fleet. Our commissioning crew, hereafter known as plank owners, are in formation and ready to assume the watch. Prior to welcoming the official party, I would like to acknowledge some distinguished guests joining us in the audience. Senate and congressional staff, representatives from our Department of Homeland Security and Department of Defense partner agencies, state, county, and local partners from New York, a number of other senior military officers and enlisted personnel, active duty, reserve, and retired who are with us here today, Coast Guard auxiliary members, our uniformed volunteer force, and finally to our families and shipmates throughout the Coast Guard who have supported us and helped us to make it where we are today. Thank you for joining us. In addition, today's ceremony would not have been possible without the generous contributions of the Commissioning Committee and our many supporting partners, to include the New York Council Navy League, the Coast Guard Foundation, L3 Harris Technologies, Bollinger Shipyards LLC, City Experiences by Hornblower, Joseph Merrill Jr., American Legion Post 1368, and other generous donors and sponsors. The incredible support they have invested in this morning's ceremony, as well as the warm welcome they and many others have provided our crew, has been second to none. Thank you. Today's color guard joins us from Sector New York. We have gathered today to celebrate and honor Clarence Sutphin Jr. and commission the cutter that carries his legacy into the 21st century. This ship is the 47th Coast Guard cutter in its class, and the first to carry the name Clarence Sutphin Jr. The cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. and all Sentinel-class cutters are the first Coast Guard ships to be named for enlisted Coast Guard heroes. Clarence Sutphin Jr. continues to be remembered for his heroic actions of service and support to Coast Guard missions, regardless of the danger or challenge. Prior to introducing our official party, I would like to introduce those already on stage. Grandees to Clarence Sutphin Jr. and Coast Guard cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr.'s long class presenter, Lieutenant Lindsay Newman. Also on stage is Chaplain Wesley Schultz. Section leader, bring the ship's company to attention.
Ship's company, attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the rendering of honors, the presentation of colors, and the playing of our national anthem and the invocation. Distinguished guests, the official party. Now, Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard retired, arriving. Now, Chairman of the Commissioning Committee, arriving. Now, Representative, Coast Guard Foundation, and L3 Harris Technologies, arriving. Now, Lieutenant U.S. Coast Guard, arriving. Now, ship sponsor, Coast Guard cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., arriving. Now, U.S. Coast Guard Atlantic area arriving. Military personnel, hand salute. Ready, two. Color guard, present the colors. Hand salute.
Color guard, present arms.
Ready, two.
Color guard, port arms. Forward, march. Ready, post. Left, face. Forward, march.
Chaplain Schultz will now deliver the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, creator of all, as we gather on this special day to celebrate the Clarence Sutphin Jr.'s commissioning, we pause to honor you as our hearts are filled with thankfulness for valiant service to our nation, past and present. Thank you for the sailor for whom this ship is named. Clarence Sutphin Jr. served in a time when our nation needed bravery the most. His courage and grave concern for the safety of others enabled him to selflessly put his life on the line so that others could live. I pray that his heroism would be embraced as a way of life for this crew, that they would rest in the knowledge that you go with them on every patrol, and that you, in turn, would make your presence known to them. Lead the crew and all of us, O Lord, in the way of peace. Unite us in the spirit of service. Nourish and sustain us in our calling for the sake of your holy name and the protection of our great nation, I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Section leader, place the ship's company at parade rest.
Ship's company, full parade rest.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Skip Bowen, the retired Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard and Vice President of Governmental Relations for Bollinger Shipyards.
Well, it is a great New York City morning. And I think over here I saw a bunch of intrepid crew members. Raise your hands, y'all. Thank you for your service. It's a great day to be here in the shadow of the Intrepid as we do this commissioning this morning. Vice Admiral Poulin, Rear Admiral Allen, and our sponsor, Ms. Mona Racera. Cutter crew, friends, and family of the U.S. Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin, Jr. It is a pleasure to be with you this morning. On behalf of Ben Bordelon, Bollinger's President and CEO, and all of the men and women of Bollinger Shipyards, greetings from Cajun country. The Clarence Sutphin is the 170th vessel the Bollinger Shipyards has delivered to the Coast Guard over a 35-year period, and it is the 47th fast response cutter built under the current program. This vessel is also the final of 6 FRCs bound for Bahrain to replace the aging cutters that have been standing the watch in the Northern Arabian Gulf for over 20 years as part of Patrol Forces Southwest Agent. In reference to the Sutphin, Ben Bordelon recently said, Bollinger is proud to continue supporting and enhancing the Coast Guard's operational presence in the Middle East and ensuring that it remains a preferred partner of maritime nations around the globe. The Bollinger team that built this vessel is second to none. I can say this with certainty, having almost 40 years of experience sailing on Bollinger-built vessels all over the world. In 2011, after almost a year of retirement from the Coast Guard, I was offered a position at Bollinger Shipyards working on the FRC program. Arriving in Louisiana, I found that many Bollinger team members that I remembered from visiting the shipyard from decades before were still there. And I discovered this was not unusual. Father and son and grandson, husband and wife and cousins, generations of Bayou craftsmen that take pride in every facet of their work. Over 600 men and women from the Lockport and surrounding areas are dedicated to this project alone. They are artists in every sense of the word, and it shows in the construction of this vessel. After the ceremony, you may have a chance to tour the cutter. If you do, I would invite you to take a close look at the details. There's no other vessel in the world like this ship, and this amazing workhorse brings it home with every delivery. And looking toward the future, Admiral Poulin, the Bollinger team is proud to continue building vessels for the Coast Guard. Through this work, we can contribute directly to the security and defense of our nation, and we are up to the challenge. At this time, I would like to ask the cutter sponsor, Mr. Sarah, to please join me at the podium. Mr. Sarah, I'd like to present this, a framed photo of Clarence Sutphin as a token of our appreciation. Thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today to help celebrate the commissioning of this ship. To the crew, fair winds and following seas. Where you're going, the seas can get pretty rough, and I can attest to that personally. But know that you have the Bollinger team with you, because this vessel is built tough, Bollinger tough. God bless you in all your journeys.
Thank you, Master Chief Bowen. It is my pleasure to introduce Colonel Charles Blaish, the commissioning chairperson for the Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. Commissioning Committee.
Thank you very much. Since we had the greetings from Cajun country, I bring greetings from the other Emerald Isle, Staten. It's my distinct pleasure to thank the Coast Guard admirals for letting us have the honor of being the commissioning chair committee to make sure this event occurred with the honor and dignity that it is entitled to. My only wish is that the ship has a safe and secure tour. God with you.
Thank you, Colonel Blaish. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Robert Montgomery, L3 Harris Technologies.
Thank you, Greetings. The men and women of L3 Technology are proud to be part of the Volunteer Coast Guard team in bringing these fantastic fast response cutters to life. L3 C5 Systems, based in Camden, New Jersey, is committed to providing game-changing C5 ISR systems to the Coast Guard throughout the life of their ships, providing significant operational advantages to these crews as they perform their various missions. At each commissioning, L3 Harris produces a poster that commemorates the heroism of the ship's namesake. The posters you see here were designed and developed by Jim DePietro, recently retired graphic artist from L3 Harris, in collaboration with Captain Robert Grant, United States Coast Guard retired. These posters will be given out at the reception following today's ceremony. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Coast Guard Foundation. The Coast Guard Foundation creates and executes programs that enrich the lives of Coast Guard service members, empower and educate Coast Guard families, and provides critical support during times of injury and loss. Along those lines, I would like to ask Lieutenant Dave Anderson to join me on stage so we can have the distinct honor of presenting a check from the Coast Guard Foundation in the amount of $5,000 to the ship's morale fund. Before I leave the podium, I'd like to recognize the family members and significant others of the crew who have made and will continue to make huge sacrifices while these crews train to bring this ship to life and will now deploy for the next year. Could all family members and significant others of the crew please stand to be recognized? The Coast Guard Foundation and L3 Harris wish you, your crew, and your family members the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce the Commander of the United States Coast Guard Atlantic Area, Vice Admiral Stephen D. Poulin.
Well, good morning, everybody. How we doing? Excellent. Boy, what a great day. It's great to be back in New York. New York has such a storied history, and it's a storied history that involves the Coast Guard. This is a good Coast Guard day because we get to bring a new Coast Guard cutter into commissioned service. Master Chief Spencer and I, Devin Spencer, our Command Master Chief for Coast Guard Atlantic Area, are thrilled to be here. I want to just mention, Master Chief Spencer was a plank owner in the establishment of Patrol Forces Southwest Asia. He was as part of the first contingent that went over there after 9/11. So Master Chief, thanks for being here, and I know this is a special moment for you as well. New York's a Coast Guard city. Do y'all know that? New York is a Coast Guard city. Alexander Hamilton, our service's founding father, was a New Yorker. He lived here, he worked here, he went to school here. He's buried at Trinity Church in Lower Manhattan. And as someone who spent his life thinking, writing, and fighting for a new America, he understood the importance of maritime security, maritime safety, and he understood that our nation's prosperity is tied to the sea. His vision was that a few armed vessels judiciously positioned at the entrance to our ports for some small expense may be useful sentinels of the law. And here we are, almost 232 years later, celebrating his vision. And it's interesting, isn't it, that we are commissioning a Sentinel-class cutter here today. Alexander Hamilton's legacy is alive and well. And today, our Coast Guard women and men continue to make history here in New York. We remember that fateful day on 9/11 when terrorism struck the homeland. But it was our Coast Guard men and women who safely evacuated more than 500,000 people from Lower Manhattan. They leaped into action, working with federal, state, and local partners. It was only a a few years later that we saw the Coast Guard again in action here, responding to Superstorm Sandy, recovering and ensuring that the waterways remained open and safe. And then, of course, we remember the miracle on the Hudson and how our Coast Guard launched into action to save those in distress. You know, it's interesting that we are here in the home of Clarence Sutphin, steeped in history, celebrating his service, celebrating his sacrifice, and in celebrating his family. You know, as I think about that fateful day on 9/11, and I think about how the Coast Guard was called into action, and as I think about how the Coast Guard deployed globally in defense of freedom, I can't help but reflect on the very sober thought that we stand here with a piece of the Twin Towers as a backdrop. Now, our Coast Guard responsibilities in New York have evolved over time, but at our core, we will continue to advance maritime safety, maritime security, and prosperity. We do that on a recurring basis, whether it's national special security events here, international events such as the General Assembly, or in our service to the public here in New York. We perform search and rescue on a daily basis. We break ice on the Hudson River so that critical commodities can flow. We continue to confront the challenges of the 21st century, cyber threats that affect the maritime domain, and ensuring the security of offshore energy production as the nation transitions to clean energy. And I can think of no better location for this commissioning ceremony, not just here in New York, but here at the Intrepid Museum, with a backdrop of so many storied assets, so many stories reflecting the joint force. This museum is a national treasure, and it's a reminder of American ingenuity. Now, the museum is now a nonprofit educational institution featuring the legendary aircraft carrier Intrepid, Space Shuttle Enterprise, the world's fastest jets, and the guided missile submarine. And, you know, again, just thinking about how this crew will be a vital part of the joint force, how we are standing here as a reflection of the joint force as we sit in the shadow of Intrepid and all those that have gone before us. So this is a special city, and this is a special place, and today is a special day. I want to recognize a few guests. Our MC recognized a lot of the dignitaries that are here, but I want to recognize first Venerable Tom Allen and his wife Kim, our First Lady of the First District. Tom and Kim, thanks for being here. Obviously, our 10th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, Skip Bowen, now representing Bollinger. Master Chief, thanks for being here, and thanks for honoring us, and keep building these great ships. We're really proud of the craftsmanship at Bollinger. We're very proud of partnering with Bollinger. And of course, we've got our stalwart here, Bob Montgomery, from both L3 Harris and the Foundation. Bob, thanks for everything that you're doing to support our Coast Guard. We've got the Navy League here, the Commissioning Committee. Colonel Blaze, thank you for being here as well. Captain Russo, we had a chance to catch up earlier. Just so many organizations here, the Coast Guard Foundation, our Combat Veterans Association, First Command, and thank you for your partnership and your commitment to our Coast Guard. It means a lot. And of course, we are very delighted to have with us today Mona Rosero, the daughter of Clarence Sutphin, to be here as a ship sponsor. I told Mona when we had a chance to talk yesterday, I said, there is an indelible bond between the sponsor and the ship. It's a bond that can't be broken. It's a bond that will carry with you for the rest of your life, and it will carry with the ship for the rest of its service. And also, David, thanks for being here as well. David Sutphin, where are you at, David? Here? Okay. But we've also got Lindsay Newman, Lieutenant Lindsay Newman here, who's a grandniece. Really appreciate it, Lindsay. Thanks for being here. Special. And of course, a special thanks goes out to all the families of Clarence Sutphin who have joined us in person, and those who may be watching online or watching this after the recording. There is no way to thank our Coast Guard families. Bob, I want to thank you for having the families stand up. I always say, I wished I could give our Coast Guard families a bag full of Bitcoin or a suitcase full of diamonds to recognize all the hard work that they've done, but I can't. So what I'll offer is just a heartfelt thanks for your support that allows us to do what we feel called to do.
Lieutenant Anderson, congratulations to you and the crew of Clarence Sutphin. It's been a long road to this point, but congratulations on the terrific work that you and the crew have done to bring this ship into service. This is our 47th fast response cutter that we will commission for the United States Coast Guard. I think that deserves a round of applause, everybody. Now, I don't think that Alexander Hamilton would recognize this ship, but I do think that Alexander Hamilton would recognize the character of Clarence Sutphin Jr. and the character of this Coast Guard crew. Selfless servants who volunteer to protect America's interest in the far reaches of the globe. And for those who may not know it, the Coast Guard is going to commission 66 fast response cutters in total, these Sentinel-class cutters, and they're each named after enlisted service members or service heroes like Clarence Sutphin Jr. And each dedication of these new cutters uncovers a little-known story, and each story adds volumes to the canon of Coast Guard greats. I'm grateful for our Coast Guard historians, our Coast Guard history professionals, and the commissioning committee for their steadfast efforts to bring to light selfless service members like Clarence Sutphin, to tell their story, and in doing so, share our Coast Guard history. Today's commissioning of the Clarence Sutphin adds the 47th chapter to the book in progress. This is a remarkable story. It's a New York story. It's a story of adaptability, courage, and action. Clarence Sutphin Jr. was born in 1923. He grew up in Valley Stream on Long Island. He enlisted in the Coast Guard in November of 1941, just weeks before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And following basic training at the Coast Guard Yard near Baltimore, he received orders to the North Carolina shore to train in amphibious operations and landing craft known as the Higgins Boat. Now, most people know about the Higgins Boat because they've seen the footage from D-Day, or they've watched the shows where those Higgins boats and their heroism landed forces on the beaches of Normandy. That was the operational design across both theaters of war. Those Higgins boats saw service in every major conflict and every major amphibious operation. Now, in 1942, in May, Clarence Sutphin recorded on board the Leonard Wood, where he would spend the next 3 years of his life. One of the many Coast Guard manned attack transports, the Wood saw action in some of the bloodiest amphibious operations of World War II. In November, Clarence and the Wood served in the landings of North Africa, the second Allied amphibious operation of the war. In July '43, he landed troops from the Wood in the invasion of Sicily. After Sicily, he crossed the Atlantic, transited the Panama Canal to participate in the Pacific Theater of Operations. In November 1943, Sutphin landed troops in the Gilbert Islands, including the capture of Macon Island. And in early 1944, he landed troops in the Marshall Islands. Over the course of these amphibious operations, Sutphin advanced through the ranks of boat operator from seaman second class to boatswain's mate first class. Early in 1944, the Leonard Wood began preparations for its next amphibious operation. Allied and Japanese leaders knew that American long-range bombers could reach the home islands from the Marianas, and both sides planned for the hardest-fought battles of the Pacific War. Allied strategists labeled the Operation Forager, which targeted the Marianas Islands of Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. With 600 ships and 128,000 troops, Forager would be one of the largest invasions of the Pacific War and test the Allies' amphibious capabilities. On Thursday, June 15th, which was D-Day for the invasion of Saipan, the Leonard Wood positioned itself off the beaches and prepared to disembark its landing craft. By 7:30 that morning, all boats were away and landing operations commenced. The landing zone included nearly 4 miles of beaches on the southwest side of the island. By 9 a.m., in spite of heavy enemy mortar, artillery fire, and machine gun fire, Clarence and his fellow landing craft operators had rushed 8,000 Marines onto the beaches. For the rest of June 15th, Clarence Sutphin and Wood's landing boats defied death by running back and forth to the beaches to land troops, ammunition, water, food, blood plasma, and medical supplies. In spite of stiff enemy resistance, the beachhead held. And over the course of that day, Clarence Sutphin and the fleet of amphibious craft put ashore an additional 12,000 troops. And by nightfall, Saipan held 20,000 U.S. troops, or about 2/3 the number of Japanese enemy troops occupying the island. That evening, and for some nights to come, Sutphin anchored his landing craft with a boat pool of 24 Higgins boats off the landing zone. At night, using a secret password, Navy patrol craft would check each boat and update the crews about possible attacks by Japanese swimmers or suicide boats. The landing craft were subject not only to armed swimmers and suicide boats, but nightly air attacks. One of Sutphin's boat crew would stand watch while the others tried to rest. However, sound sleep was unknown in the Battle of Saipan. From sunup to sundown, Sutphin worked on the beaches, ran his boat back and forth between the transports and the beach, and there was only one channel to get through the island's reef to reach the beaches. So once he entered the reef, there was no way to lay offshore and escape enemy sniper fire. He relied on the experience he gained through the landings in North Africa, in Italy, and the Southwest Pacific to avoid those coral reefs, to avoid enemy fire, enemy mortars, and near misses by artillery. Those hazards, as well as sniper fire, forced him to steer his Higgins boat on bended knee behind the boat's steel plating. He risked his life repeatedly to save others. In one instance during the battle, he personally swam a tow line to a stranded Higgins boat. He saved 8 Marines that were stranded and under heavy enemy fire. And those are only 2 examples of extraordinary heroism that day and throughout his service. And during the months after Saipan, Clarence and the Leonard Wood went on to participate in amphibious operations in Palau, the Philippine landings of Leyte and Lingayen Gulf. By the time Sutphin left the Wood, he had become the senior enlisted man overseeing Wood's landing boat division of nearly 20 landing craft. He was a gun crew member, and he was a master at arms. As a boatswain mate first class, he had high marks. He was well respected, well regarded, and he was recommended to advance to Chief Petty Officer. Unfortunately, there were no vacancies in his rating at that time. Now, Clarence stayed with the Leonard Wood through May of 1945, and in his 3 years on board the transport, he participated in all of the Wood's 8 major amphibious operations. These spanned the globe from North Africa to the Philippines and aided in the defeat of Vichy France, Germany, Italy, and Japanese military forces. For his exceptional bravery under fire on the beaches of Saipan, Sutphin received the Bronze Star Medal from the Navy, the medal citation signed by no other than famed Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz. And like the cutter's namesake, this crew will soon travel more than 10,000 miles to sail across the Atlantic, through the Strait of Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean Sea, through the Suez Canal into the Red Sea, across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and into the Gulf of Aden, and into the Arabian Sea, to support our national objectives. Once they arrive in the Arabian Gulf, this crew will work directly for the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet, conducting operations, ensuring maritime security, theater security cooperation efforts, and thickening the lines of partnership with regional nations. They will exercise maritime capabilities and responsibilities to promote security and stability in the region. They will protect offshore infrastructure. They will protect high-value assets. They will interdict illegal weapons and narcotics that fuel terrorism in the region. They will contest malign actions of state and non-state actors that create instability, promote violence, and promote corruption that undermines the rule of law. I recall at a previous commissioning, Vice Admiral Jim Lloyd, who is a good friend, he is the current Deputy Commander of U.S. Central Command, and he was also a former 5th Fleet Commander, very familiar with the Coast Guard's work over there. And people would ask Jim, they would say, Jim, what is the Coast Guard doing in the Arabian Gulf? And his response was simple. He said, everything. And that is true. That is so true. Now, Clarence Sutphin Jr. will be one of 6 fast response cutters that will serve in Bahrain, replacing the 110-foot cutters that have been in that area of operation since 2003. Clarence Sutphin Jr. will join the Charles Moulthrop, the Robert Goldman, Emily Tunnell, and Glenn Harris, who are already on station doing great work, doing exceptional work in support. Those crews are keeping the Coast Guard brand high, and those crews continue to be a daily inspiration to me as the Atlantic Area Commander. This cutter, the Clarence Sutphin, will join the John Sherman, which was commissioned in Tampa just a few weeks ago, and they will both start their transit across the Atlantic under escort by the Coast Guard cutter Mohawk to arrive on scene in Bahrain, and we're going to work them hard on the way over. This is an incredible asset, and we've got a lot of plans for them to engage with partner nations throughout the duration of their transit. And then they will arrive in Bahrain, go through warfighting certification, where I know, David, that this crew will exemplify the high spirits of the Coast Guard. You will be at the pointy end of freedom, and you will prevail. And these ships are now one-for-one replacements for the 110-foot cutters that are over there. These are better ships with greater seakeeping capability. They have better launch capability with over-the-horizon small boats. They have enhanced defensive measures and improved command control and sophisticated technologies, as you heard Bob Montgomery talk about. These modern assets, coupled with our inherent Coast Guard capabilities, our skill sets and our partnerships, make the Coast Guard the right complement for the joint force to join our Navy and Marine Corps partners. United in service, we're going to bring a range of maritime capabilities that we will employ across the competition lethality continuum. And while we train to operate across that entire continuum, and we pride ourselves in our ability to work effectively in both that cooperation and compete continuum aspect of the continuum, and that's when we demonstrate our value to the nation. Make no mistake, this crew is ready to engage. They are ready to confront and defeat threats with the necessary force that's required. The racing stripe on the hull of this ship is a symbol around the world for the rule of law, of good maritime governance, and in hope. To the crew of the Clarence Sutphin, you will strike fear into the hearts of the enemies, you will deter our adversaries, but you will bring comfort to those in distress. And undoubtedly, this Coast Guard crew, demonstrating the same qualities as the namesake Clarence Sutphin, adaptability, courage, and a bias for action, will earn the trust of the 5th Fleet. Lieutenant Anderson's, your crew's incredibly hard work as plank owners of the Clarence Sutphin bound for Bahrain to operate on the joint force will set the stage for us for years to come. And this crew has done a tremendous amount of work preparing the ship for operations thus far, and I know that there is a lot of hard work ahead, but you will overcome that and excel. As I conveyed to you last night, my charge to you is very simple. Be brilliant on the basics, remain vigilant, and stand stronger together. Let me finish where I started this morning. I am incredibly grateful for this opportunity to celebrate today's commissioning here in New York with a backdrop of the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. I can think of no better location for a commissioning ceremony. The Intrepid Museum fills its mission to honor our heroes, educate the public, and inspire our youth by connecting them to history through hands-on exploration while bringing the future of inspiring innovation. I suspect that the crew of the Coast Guard cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. will be inspired today to write a new chapter in our nation's history and represent this city as those who have come before. Again, to the crew, thank you for your hard work in preparing the ship for operations. Take good care of this cutter, and it will serve the nation, our partners, and our allies, and the American people for years to come. Congratulations on this commissioning milestone, and Godspeed on your endeavors. And again, to the crew I say, and to everyone here, thank you for being a part of this celebration. It's a celebration of this crew of Clarence Sutphin. It's a celebration of his family. It's a celebration of our families. It's a celebration of service and community, and it's a celebration of New York, a Coast Guard city. Thank you all, Semper Paratus.
Thank you, Admiral Poulin. Ladies and gentlemen, Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr.'s prospective commanding officer, Lieutenant David Anderson.
Section leader, place the ship's company at attention.
Ship's company, Ted, should.
Admiral Poulin, I would be honored if you would join me at the lectern to place Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. into commission.
Now, for the President of the United States of America, I place Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. into commission service. May God bless and guide this ship and all who sail on her.
Thank you, Admiral Poulin. Executive Officer, hoist the colors and commissioning pennant.
Aye, Captain.
OD, hoist the colors and commissioning pennant. Aye, sir. Sir, the colors and the commissioning pennant are flying above the United States Coast Guard cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. Very well.
Captain, the colors and commissioning pennant are flying over Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr.
Very well. I will now read my orders. From Commander, Coast Guard Personnel Command, to Lieutenant David Anderson, United States Coast Guard. Subject, orders assignment. As Commanding Officer, Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. When directed, proceed to report to Pre-Commissioning Unit Clarence Sutphin Jr. for duties in conjunction with fitting out and delivery. Upon commissioning of Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., assume the duty of Commanding Officer. Admiral, Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. is placing commission, I assume command.
Very well. Carry out your orders.
Very well. Executive Officer, set the first watch.
OD, set the import watch, section 1 on deck. Aye, sir. Watch is set. Very well.
Captain, the first watch is set.
Very well.
Lieutenant Lindsay Newman, please join me at the lectern. The officer of the deck is the commanding officer's direct representative, and while on watch, is responsible for the safety and smooth operation of the ship and crew. The long glass is the traditional symbol of an officer of the deck's authority on a ship of the line. Today, Lieutenant Lindsay Newman will assist in setting the ship's first watch by passing the long glass to the operations officer, Lieutenant Junior Grade John Brandt, who is charged with leading the watch section. Now invite Lieutenant David Anderson to assist in bringing the cutter to life.
We are honored to have Miss Mona D. Rosero, daughter of Clarence Sutphin Jr. with us today. The notion of a cutter or ship sponsor is deeply rooted in the naval tradition, with women selected for each new cutter based on its namesake and planned mission. Sponsors play an important role in the life of a new cutter, maintaining a relationship with the crew and participating in ceremonies such as this one today, and eventually decommissioning. Ms. Mona Rosero, I would be honored if you would join me at the lectern.
Mona Rosero, I invite you to the lectern to provide your remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Lieutenant Rum, for your kind introduction. We, my brothers Doug, Greg, and Ryan, my sister Carol, grandchildren Matt, Sarah, Bethany, Matthew, and Dana, grandnieces and nephew Casey, Lindsay, and Jamie, and great-grandchildren Carson, Caitlin, Marcus, Molly Ann, Jake, and Dylan are all deeply touched and humbled by this incredible honor. And what an amazing gift that the entire extended Sutphin family can be here to share this wonderful occasion. To Admiral Poulin, Lieutenant Douglas Schneider, retired Captain Robert C. Grant, Dr. William Thiessen, the Commissioning Committee, the New York Council, Navy League of the United States, and all the other members of the Coast Guard who made this possible. The commissioning of the new Sentinel-class first response cutter, Clarence Sutphin. You have my family's deepest gratitude. It is beyond my wildest dreams to be granted the sponsorship of a Coast Guard cutter bearing my father's name, and representing the entire Sutphin family is a tremendous honor and privilege for me. By now, what's been written and said about my dad, you have a good sense of Clarence Sutphin, a seaman, the Bronze Star recipient who distinguished himself in battle during World War II. Today, I want to give you a sense of Clarence Sutphin, the person, and I'd like to do that with 4 words. So I will start with a word I've already used several times today: family. Appropriate here because family was the most important thing in my dad's life. He was dedicated to being the best provider for his family he could possibly be. My dad gave us many tangible, material things: a nice house in a good neighborhood to grow up in, a reliable used car when we got our driver's licenses, and we were older, financial support as we went off to college or started our careers. But more important, my father provided the support and guidance that helped us become kind, responsible adults. He helped us work through our problems, encouraged us when we failed, and celebrated our achievements. He taught us to diminish right from wrong, distinguish right from wrong, but when we were wrong, to admit it, to accept the consequences, learn from our mistakes, and move on. Dad was the perfect role model for instilling in us a strong work ethic. To this day, I haven't met anyone work as hard as my dad, with never a complaint. When we were growing up, the rule was if you didn't have sports or other after-school activities to attend, you had to have a part-time job. Not so much for the money, but to learn responsibility. Looking back, that couldn't have been very easy. My dad worked long hours and often returned home late. He and my mother had to deal with 5 kids, all with different personalities, posing their own unique parenting challenges. We were in the range of being very compliant with Dad's guidance to being downright rebellious. And I'm not going to mention any names here, Brian. With 5 kids, we did have our share of arguments. But Dad wanted us to resolve our differences on our own and learn how to compromise to resolve our differences. That was fine with us because we quickly learned that if Dad had to be called in to settle an argument, we all had our independent lives. The second word is generosity. My dad really gave of his time, money, knowledge, and assistance. If someone needed help on a matter big or small, my dad was there to help. The instinct that led my father to come to the aid of his fellow seamen and Marines back in Saipan was the very same instinct that would lead my dad to help a neighbor cut down a tree, fix a car, or even help build an addition to a house. And he probably had a better way to do it. And even when we became adults, Dad would help us with bigger purchases, such as a new car or buying our first houses. A great example of the types the things my dad would do to help us. In my 20s, I decided to move up to Maine. He spent his entire winter weekend loading my furniture into a U-Haul, driving up to Maine, unloading it, and turning around the next morning to drive home. Dad, of course. And by the way, the U-Haul had a regulator on it preventing it to go no more than 40 miles an hour. Third word is humility. At the height of his career, Dad was a top executive at one of our country's leading insurance companies. But from what little he talked about his job, you wouldn't have known if he worked on the loading dock or sat in a corner executive office. He worked many long, hard hours to get that position, but never once bragged about it. It was the same with Dad's time during the war. He just never talked about it. When my brother was a boy, he came across my father's old footlocker, and in it found, among newspaper clippings and letters, my dad's Bronze Star. He asked Dad about it, and my dad dismissed it as just something I got during the war. End of discussion. Years later, Dad's sister, our Aunt Joan, told us more about Dad's wartime heroics, but when we tried to get Dad to talk about it, we only got a name, rank, and serial number response. The final word is water. Throughout his life, my dad loved being on, in, and around the water. My father and the Coast Guard were really made for each other. Perhaps Dad's biggest pleasure was taking our family out on our boat. I remember many boats throughout childhood, but Dad's pride and joy was a Chris Craft 36 cabin cruiser named Mona after our wonderful mother. Being that Mom and I shared the same name, I used to tell my friends that Dad named the boat after me because I was his favorite. To us kids, that boat seemed like a yacht, but Dad was right at home, sitting up on the flybridge, cruising the Long Island Sound. One morning, we headed out to go fishing for bluefish. We were out on the Long Island Sound, about an hour from our home port of Northport, New York, when Dad, up on the flybridge, spotted a school of bluefish. He motored towards them, and before we knew it, they were swimming all around the boat. He yelled to me to get up to the bow and throw over the anchor. I was so thrilled to finally have the chance. The boat was in complete chaos. The school of fish are thrashing all around the boat. My brothers already have 2 fish on each of their lines tangled together. Dad, simultaneously trying to bait my sister's hook and entangle my brother's lines when a bluefish hit his line. My mother, well, at this point, I think she was sitting in the cabin watching and laughing at the scene playing out before her. He yelled to me again, throw over the anchor. I picked up the anchor and gave it my best heave-ho, and the minute it left my hands, I realized there was no line attached to it. And helplessly watched as it sank to the bottom of the Long Island Sound. Dad, sounding a lot more like Captain Bligh at this point, barked at me, "Did you throw it over?" And I immediately answered, "Yes, but I think we have a problem." As soon as my father realized what had happened, and knowing we had no spare anchor, the look on his face told me I was probably going to be the next thing thrown over. I think the fact that we caught 35 bluefish that morning was the only reason I wasn't. It also became evident to me at that moment that I was never going to live this one down, and I haven't. Just ask any one of my siblings. Given how much the Coast Guard meant to him, it is difficult to imagine a more fitting honor and tribute to my father as the commissioning of this magnificent cutter in his name. Back in 1941, my dad was just 18 years old when he enlisted in the Coast Guard. 4 years later, when his term of duty had ended, he was a decorated war hero, credited with risking his life to save the lives of others. While my dad's heroism was exemplary, you, the men and women, Clarence Sutphin proud to be in the Coast Guard, committed to protecting the interests of our country and our allies, prepared for conflict, and willing to enter dangerous waters without hesitation. If my father were here today, he would be beaming with pride, standing tall, proud to be standing shoulder to shoulder with you and ready to get underway. Lieutenant Anderson, rest assured my dad will be aboard with you and your crew as you accept charge of this beautiful vessel and embark on your new assignments. And if you hear a little voice in your head saying, Captain, a few degrees port, you will definitely know where it is coming from. Our hero, our dad. Now, I'm proud to say, officers and crew of the Clarence Sutphin Jr. lay aboard and bring our boat to life.
Thank you, Mrs. Mona Rosero. Distinguished guests, please rise for the playing of Semper Paratus. Distinguished guests, please be seated. Lieutenant Anderson will now report for duty.
Admiral Poulin, I report for duty. Request permission to break your flag.
Very well.
Executive officer, break the admiral's flag.
Quartermaster of the watch, break the admiral's flag. Aye, sir.
now read my remarks. Good morning, Vice Admiral Poulin, Rear Admiral Allen, Sutphin family, and family, friends, and crew members of Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. It's an honor and mine to be standing before you today on this beautiful New York City morning as we mark the ceremonial beginning of the life of the Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. When I first got the call a little over a year ago that I'd been selected to be the first commanding officer of Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., I was beyond excited for the adventure that laid ahead. However, I will say the most humbling and prideful moment was upon the Coast Guard taking delivery of the cutter and connecting with the children of BM1 Clarence Sutphin Jr. Mrs. Rosero, when sending pictures and communicating through email to you and your siblings, I can immediately feel the emotions and joy you all had seeing the cutter that bears your father's name and honors his heroic actions and great namesake. That's a feeling I hold dearly and will never forget to you the remainder of my life. To the Sutphin family, I can promise you, we as a crew took extreme pride in setting a high standard that honors our great namesake, Clarence Sutphin Jr., and we will ensure that the standard is maintained for the crews that follow us. I would request our sponsor, Ms. Mona Rosero, to join me at the lectern. Ms. Rosero, in honor of the officers and crew of Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., presents this to you for the support you've given us and your continued support throughout the life cycle of our cutter. I would like to thank Colonel Blake, the New York Navy League, and the entire Commission Committee for planning and putting together this amazing ceremony. I would also like to thank Master Chief Skip Bowen and the rest of the volunteer shipyard team who could not be here today. Without their countless hours and work and sacrifice following Hurricane Ida, we for sure not be here today. I would also thank Mr. Margaret Montgomery from L3 Harris and the Coast Guard Foundation. We appreciate that support in funding our morale check. I know our morale petty officer, Wagner, is chomping at the bit to get away with that money. Next, I would like to take this time to thank and honor the families and loved ones of the crew of Clarence Sutphin Jr. The crew consists of daughters, sons, husbands, fiancés, uncles, brothers, sisters, longtime fathers, and new fathers. I know these past few months of our pre-commissioning process have been tough, and the next year of our assignment may be harder at times as we depart the United States for our home port of Montgomery. Growing up a military child myself, I know it can be difficult to have a loved one that you do not see every day. However, with the love and support you have provided to the crew, you have made my job as commanding officer easier. That strong support network you have provided has allowed the crew to stay focused on the task at hand and bringing the cutter to life, and will allow us to carry out our mission safely and effectively. I would appreciate if the audience could join me in a round of applause and appreciation for all the family and loved ones of the crew of the Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. Lastly, I would like to thank the great crew of the Coast Guard Cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr. Guys, we finally made it to the big day. It's been quite a ride to get here. From reporting to pre-deployment training in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, learning how to work together in combat situations, to reporting to Air Station Elizabeth City as a cutter crew, awaiting our time to report to Volunteer Shipyard following Hurricane Ida. To everyone in the audience, it was an interesting experience walking to the galley of Coast Guard Air Station Elizabeth City, being members of the Coast Guard, wearing Navy uniforms, and being without a cutter at the time. I'm still convinced the aviators are still confused who we actually were there. However, with all the trials and hurdles we have had to overcome to get to this day, you have not once wavered or folded to the pressure. With the mission we have ahead of us, I know you will perform to the highest standard, just as our great namesake did when he was called into action. I am proud of where we are today and the family we have become. I can't put into words my extreme pride and joy that I am your commanding officer. Lastly, I would like the audience to join me in a round of applause and salute this amazing crew who stands behind me. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, please rise as Chaplain Schultz delivers the benediction.
Let us pray. Eternal Lord, we look forward to great things from the mighty Clarence Sutphin. We expect nothing less than her best as she and her crew proceed under the umbrella of your care in this calling you have given her. Shine your guiding light upon her as she goes out to serve you, our nation, and our Coast Guard. Keep her in the palm of your almighty and righteous hand, guiding her in all of her future assignments. It is in your most holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Schultz. Distinguished guests, this concludes today's ceremony. The official party will remain on stage for ceremonial photos. You are now cordially invited to a reception hosted by the Commissioning Committee, Bollinger Shipyards, L3 Harris Technologies, and a number of other generous donors. The reception will be right here immediately following the conclusion of the ceremony, and all are welcome to attend. Tours of the cutter will begin following the reception and will be offered on a first-come, first-served basis. On behalf of the officers and crew of the Coast Guard cutter Clarence Sutphin Jr., thank you for your attendance today.